My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 48 years old, and I'm a pediatric neurosurgeon at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. For 2 decades, I dedicated my life to saving children and building a family I believed was solid. Emily, my wife, and I raised 2 incredible children in our $1.2 million home in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. I was the pillar of our family. With my $650,000 annual salary, I not only supported our lifestyle, but I was also the emotional center. Emily depended on me for everything, from decisions about home renovations to vacation plans. She never worked after we got married, claiming she wanted to dedicate herself entirely to the family. As a neurosurgeon trained at Johns Hopkins, I'm used to pressure. Crises are part of my daily life. When you hold a child's life in your hands, you learn to stay calm and observe every detail. This observant and controlled nature became part of who I am, both at the hospital and at home. But in the months before the accident, I started to notice subtle changes in Emily. Little things that my brain, trained to detect anomalies, couldn't ignore. She would take trips to visit family that never quite made sense. She'd receive calls she'd answer in other rooms, and she started asking strange questions about my $2 million life insurance policy. "Daniel, are you sure everything is arranged if something happens to you?" she asked one night, out of nowhere as we watched TV. "Why do you ask?" I replied, watching her expression. "Oh, just a precaution with your job being so stressful." My job wasn't dangerous in the way she was implying, but my medical intuition, the same one that helped me diagnose complex brain tumors, started sounding alarms. Mark, my younger brother, was also showing up at our house more frequently, always when I was at the hospital, according to Emily. He had always been problematic, financially dependent, and with a history of questionable decisions. But Emily said he was changing, that he needed our help. Years earlier, I had structured my assets with my lawyer. I created an irrevocable trust with specific clauses for situations of prolonged incapacity. It was a protection not only for my $3.2 million in assets, but mainly for my children. Emily didn't know the details. She was never interested in paperwork, as she called it. Then came that Tuesday in March. I was coming home from the hospital after a 14-hour surgery when a drunk driver changed everything. The impact was devastating. Severe head trauma, multiple fractures. The doctors put me in an induced coma to give my brain a chance to recover. But here's what no one, not even Emily, fully understood. An induced coma doesn't mean the mind stops working. As a neurosurgeon, I knew this better than anyone. The brain continues to process information, storing memories. You might not be able to respond, but you're listening, you're registering. And that's exactly what happened to me. In the first few weeks, the voices were just background noise. Gradually, they started to become clearer. First, it was the nurses, then the doctors discussing my prognosis. And then Emily's visits began. Initially, she seemed like the grieving wife everyone expected to see. But when she thought we were alone, her true nature emerged. "How long will this last?" I heard her whisper on the phone one afternoon. "No, I can't keep pretending forever. Life has to go on." My body was immobile, but my mind was more alert than ever. Every word was etched with surgical precision into my memory. It was in the 3rd week that I heard the first conversation that would change everything. Emily was in my room, but she wasn't alone. The voice with her was unmistakable. My own brother, Mark. "The doctors said it might be permanent," Emily whispered. 3 weeks and no real sign of improvement." "That might even be better for us," Mark replied, his voice laden with a coldness I had never noticed before. "Think about it, Emily. He's not dead, so there's no life insurance yet. But he's also not awake to mess up our plans." My mind processed those words with the same precision I used to analyze brain scans. Every syllable crystallized in my memory. "Mark, are you sure about this?" Emily asked. But there was no real hesitation in her voice, just confirmation. "I'm sure about us," he replied. "You deserve to be happy, Emily, and the kids deserve a father who is truly present." A father who is present. The words hit me like a scalpel. Mark was talking about taking my place, not just with my wife, but with my children. In the following days, the visits became more frequent and revealing. They discussed practical details with frightening naturalness. How to access my Wells Fargo accounts. How to justify selling the house. How Mark would move in to help with the children while I was incapacitated. His lawyer is complicated, Emily said in a conversation I overheard the following week. He made some strange arrangements with the estate. Something about a trust I don't understand. Don't worry about that now, Mark reassured her. First, let's consolidate our situation. If he doesn't recover, we'll deal with the legal details later. They were planning my life, or the absence of it, as if I were already a removed obstacle. But there was something they didn't know. I was registering every word, every nuance, every detail of their betrayal. During the day, when there was more activity in the hospital, Emily played the role of the devoted wife. She cried to the nurses, asked about my progress, held my hand while talking about our plans for when you come home, dear. But at night, when the hospital became quieter, the mask fell. He was always controlling, I heard Emily tell Mark on one of those nightly visits. Everything had to be his way. Work, home, even how we spent money. Now I can finally breathe. You were never truly happy with him, Mark agreed. I always knew that. You deserve someone who values you. The irony was not lost on me. For 20 years, I had worked 16-hour shifts to give Emily everything she wanted. Dream home, new car, expensive vacations, private school for the kids at $45,000 annually each. And now I discovered that my dedication was seen as control. But the conversation that truly opened my eyes happened in the 4th week. Emily and Mark were discussing something I hadn't considered: how to explain their relationship to the children. They're smart, Emily said. Sophie has already asked why Uncle Mark is always home now. We'll say I'm helping the family during this difficult time, Mark suggested. It's natural for Daniel's brother to take on responsibilities. And then, when things settle down, then we'll say we found each other in grief. That love arose from the need for mutual support. People will understand. They had a ready narrative. A story that would transform them from traitors into victims of circumstance, into people who found love amidst tragedy. It was at that moment that I realized the true extent of their conspiracy. It wasn't just about money or convenience. They were rewriting our entire family history, turning my temporary absence into their permanent opportunity. While my body remained immobile, my neurosurgeon's mind began to work differently. I started to analyze not only what they were doing, but how I could use this knowledge when, not if, but when, I emerged from this state. The irrevocable trust I had created years earlier was not just financial protection. It was a legal fortress that Emily and Mark couldn't even imagine existed. They were making plans based on completely wrong assumptions about my wealth and their ability to access it. My memory, trained by years of intensive medical studies, was cataloging every conversation, every date, every detail of their betrayal. When the time came, I would have a mental record more accurate than any recording. But there was something else they didn't know. The EEG monitoring equipment was registering brain activity, consistent with preserved consciousness. Any competent neurologist could confirm that my brain was functioning normally, just temporarily unable to control my body. Emily and Mark were digging their own graves word by word, visit after visit, and I was documenting every move. In the 5th week, something changed. My neurological indicators began to show clearer signs of recovery. The nurses commented on more consistent reflex movements. Dr. Richardson, my neurology colleague, mentioned to Emily that there were reasons for cautious optimism. I could feel my body gradually responding. First, it was small sensations, then subtle control over facial muscles. But I kept it a secret, continuing to appear completely unconscious. I had learned too much valuable information to waste the advantage. Emily and Mark didn't notice the change initially. They continued their conspiratorial visits, now with a more urgent tone. If he wakes up, we need to be prepared, Mark said in a conversation I overheard in the 6th week. Our version of the story needs to be solid. What if he suspects something? Emily asked, for the first time showing real nervousness. How could he suspect? He was in a coma, Emily. There's no way he could know what we talked about here. If only they knew how wrong they were. But the conversation that truly sealed their fate happened 3 days later. Emily was alone with me in the room when she answered a call. Thinking I couldn't hear, she spoke without any caution. "No, Mom, it's not that simple," she said into the phone. "I can't just go back to him if he wakes up. Too much has changed. Mark and I, well, it's real now, it's not just convenience." She paused, listening to her mother's response. "You don't understand. I was never truly happy with Daniel. He's a good provider, yes, $650,000 a year is not little. But he's cold, obsessive with work. Mark makes me feel alive again." Another pause. "The money? Of course, I thought about it. But it's not just that. It's freedom, Mom. Freedom to be myself for the first time in 20 years. After she hung up, Emily approached my bed. For a moment, I thought she might show some remorse, some sign of the woman I married. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Daniel, but this is better for all of us. You'll never understand, but I need to be happy too." 2 days later, I was ready. I had regained enough control over my body to simulate a gradual awakening. But first, I made a discreet call using the hospital phone. "Richard," I said to my lawyer when he answered, my voice still weak but determined. "It's me, Daniel. I need you to come to the hospital immediately. And bring the trust documents. All of them." "Daniel, my God, you're awake. Emily said that—" "Richard," I interrupted him, "Emily doesn't know I'm calling, and there are things I need to tell you before she finds out I've regained consciousness." When Richard arrived 2 hours later, I already had a complete plan. I explained about my ability to hear during the coma, about the conversations I had witnessed, about the conspiracy between Emily and Mark. "Is that medically possible?" Richard asked, skeptical. "Completely. And we have the EEG records to prove consistent brain activity throughout the period. Any expert can confirm that I was neurologically capable of forming and retaining memories." Richard took detailed notes. As an estate attorney, he immediately understood the legal implications. "The trust is untouchable," he confirmed. "Emily has no access, never had. And if she tried to make movements based on false information about incapacity—" "Fraud," I completed. "And conspiracy to commit fraud. Daniel, are you sure you want to go this route? This will destroy your family." "Richard, my family has already been destroyed. By her. I'm just documenting the wreckage." That afternoon, I simulated my official awakening. Emily was present along with Mark, who had now become a constant presence at the hospital, taking on the role of family support. "Daniel," Emily cried when I opened my eyes, tears that seemed genuine streaming down her face. "Oh my God, you're back!" Mark approached, placing his hand on my shoulder with excessive familiarity. "Welcome back, brother. We were all worried." I looked at them for a long moment, letting the silence settle. Then with a voice still weak but clear, I said, "I heard you." The change in their expressions was instant. Emily paled. Mark withdrew his hand from my shoulder as if he had been burned. "What do you mean, dear?" Emily tried, her voice trembling. "Every conversation, every plan, every word about taking over my life, about selling our house in Bryn Mawr, about how to explain your relationship to my children." I paused, watching the panic grow in their eyes. "About how I was controlling and you deserved to be happy." Mark tried to regain his composure. "Daniel, you were in a coma. That's impossible. To a layman, perhaps. But I'm a neurosurgeon trained at Johns Hopkins, Mark. I know exactly how the brain works in an induced coma state. And I have 6 weeks of neurological records proving my mind was fully active." Emily started to cry, but now they were tears of despair, not relief. "I also called my lawyer," I continued calmly. "He's preparing the necessary documentation. Emily, you'll find that you have no access to anything you imagined you had. And Mark," I looked directly at my brother, "you'll find that fraud and conspiracy are federal crimes." The silence in the room was deafening. broken only by the constant beep of the heart monitors, including my own, which remained strangely stable for someone who had just confronted his own betrayal. The following days, Emily and Mark desperately tried to reverse the situation. Emily showed up at the hospital with flowers, tears, and elaborate apologies. "Daniel, I was in shock," she pleaded. "When you went into a coma, I panicked. I didn't know how to handle everything alone. Mark was just helping me." "Helping," I repeated, my voice remaining neutral. "Is that what you call planning to sell our house in Bryn Mawr and taking over my life?" Mark tried a different approach, appealing to our family ties. "Brother, you're misunderstanding everything. We were just discussing possibilities, in case you didn't recover. It's natural to prepare for the worst." "You laughed at me," I replied calmly. "You called me a vegetable. You discussed how long it would take to access my insurance. That doesn't sound like preparation. That sounds like celebration." The manipulation attempts continued for a week. Emily brought the children, hoping my paternal presence would soften my stance. But when Sophie, my 12-year-old daughter, innocently asked why Uncle Mark was living at home now, Emily's entire facade crumbled. She couldn't explain to our daughter why she had installed my own brother in our mainline home before even knowing if I would survive. It was then that Emily shifted strategy to veiled threats. "Daniel, if you continue with this, I'll fight for custody of the children. They'll say your mental state was compromised after the coma." "Interesting theory," I replied. "Let's test it in court." The divorce proceedings began 2 weeks after my recovery. Richard from DeShare LLP had built an airtight case. The neurological records confirmed my cognitive ability during the coma. Emily's attempts to access accounts at Wells Fargo and insurance policies were documented by the bank. All denied due to the trust protections she was unaware of. But the most devastating evidence came when Richard obtained Emily's phone records. Dozens of calls to Mark during my coma, many lasting for hours. Calls made from CHOP itself, while she pretended to be by my side as a devoted wife. In the Pennsylvania courtroom, Emily tried to maintain her version that they were just family support conversations, until Richard played my detailed testimony of the conversations I overheard. "She literally told defendant Mark Hayes," Richard read aloud. "He was always controlling. Everything had to be his way. Now I can finally breathe." "Were those words of support, Ms. Hayes?" Emily couldn't answer. The situation got even worse when the prosecution decided to investigate the attempted fraud. Mark, with a criminal record for minor financial schemes, became the primary target. Hospital recordings showed him entering and leaving my room at suspicious times, always accompanied by Emily. The investigation revealed that they had already begun to implement their plans. Mark had registered himself as my caregiver in various institutions, attempting to obtain information about my assets. Emily had consulted 3 different lawyers about wife's rights in case of permanent incapacity. The civil trial was quick and definitive. I obtained full custody of the children, who, shocked by the truth about their mother's behavior, chose to stay with me. Emily lost her right to alimony due to proven infidelity. The trust protected all $3.2 million in assets she imagined she could access, but the criminal consequences were even more severe. Emily was convicted of attempted fraud and conspiracy. Mark, with his record, received a harsher sentence, 2 years in prison for aggravated fraud and coercion. 6 months later, I was back at work at CHOP, but in a new position. My unique experience, surviving a coma while maintaining consciousness, transformed me into a sought-after expert in cases of altered states of consciousness. I received an offer to lead a research program on cognition in coma patients. The children and I became closer than ever. Sophie once told me, "Daddy, I knew something was wrong when Mommy didn't really cry at the hospital. You taught us to always observe people carefully." I founded a nonprofit organization to protect families of coma patients from similar abuses. Other survivors shared similar stories. Family members who saw an opportunity where there should have been only love and care. Emily served her sentence and now works a low-level job in another city. Mark was released from prison a year ago and lives in isolation, his reputation completely destroyed. Neither of them has attempted contact since. I feel no anger or desire for revenge. In fact, I feel a deep peace. They dug their own graves with their choices. I merely documented the process and allowed justice to take its natural course. The experience taught me that life can knock us down in unexpected ways, but our ability to observe, listen, and prepare in silence can be our greatest strength. True victory is not destroying others, it's rebuilding oneself stronger and wiser. Today, when I operate on children in critical situations, I remember that even in the darkest moments when all seems lost, our minds continue to work, registering, preparing for the right moment to act. And you? What would you do if you discovered a betrayal of this magnitude? How would you react if you were betrayed by those you trusted most? Leave your comments below. Your stories always surprise me. If this account touched you in any way, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share with someone who needs to remember that the truth always finds a way. Until the next story, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply letting justice take its course.